Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I talk about employment gaps and how to talk about personal challenges in the job search. Chris Whitehead returns to the show and we talk about environmental justice, air quality, and public speaking. And finally, we all know that air is mostly gas, but it's not all gas. There are particles of things like dust and smoke called aerosols, but there are also living organisms in the air called bioaerosols. Before you start worrying about monsters falling from the sky, drum roll, please. It's just pollen.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I was like, what is this bioaerosol? That's so cool. What an incredible term. And it's like pollen and fungal spores. And you're like, oh, that's far less interesting.
Hit that music.
NAEP will be hosting their next advanced NEPA training virtually on Wednesday, October 25th, 2023 from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Central Time. The workshop will benefit those professionals who work in related natural resources disciplines, who work with federal land management or real estate transactions, federal agency projects or permitting, and transportation or other infrastructure projects with a NEPA review component. Register at www.naep.org.
And now, it's time for our sponsor.
I'm ready.
All right, you got 30 seconds to make us laugh. And if you go over 30 seconds, then you owe me a coffee.
Okay, deal. All right. You have to tell me when to go.
Go.
Okay, folks, you all know Works for Now, which is just stop doing your job and you know, we tell you how to not do your job and then eventually you get fired, right? But there's a new product on the market called Works 5 Now. And that's right. We take an extra step and also start sending really mean and cruel things to anyone you want. And that will get you fired faster. There you go. You're going to have so many options. You can do it to your boss, your coworkers, your friends, your family, whoever it is. We will send mild insults that don't get us sued. And I'm telling you right now, if you do not want to do your job, don't do Works for Now, do Works 5 Now. That's right. It's one more number and that makes it better. That's how we all do these things. And scene. I don't know. Ran out of steam.
Let it slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Dang. Good concepts. Keep working on it.
Yeah, that's that one. I want another crack at that one. All right, let's get to our segment.
We could talk about when I'm career coaching, a lot of times people will reach out because they have some sort of challenge that they need to get over in their career search, like, you know, a health issue or something that kept them from working for a while, working moms returning back to school, and they really want to know, how do I overcome that? Or how do I talk about it in my interview? They're afraid to talk about it. So a lot of times they try to hide it. Right. And I always try to tell them how, you know, you don't have to give all the details, especially on like a health issue, you know, it's your personal information. But if you've been living with something that is challenging and you're succeeding, like that really shows that you have grit and determination.
Yes.
So it's not something that you should, hello, little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet. There's this spider crawling
I saw
right
that.
My face.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow, that's a huge spider.
Okay.
Sam's mortified. Yep. And now it's just in the room with you.
Whew.
Ew.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Okay. That was.
See how courageous I am?
That was wild. You've overcome adversity, Laura.
Right.
The spider is still in the room, folks. It is still in the room. We do not know where it is. It is now gone, but
it's gone. But he's been set free. It's not in front of my face, so that's okay.
Yes, out of sight, not out of mind. We're all hoping Laura is okay.
So anyway, yeah, overcoming challenges.
There you go. That like was spiders. Literally like, yeah, we have
calm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Laugh,
wow.
Joke.
Yeah, that was perfect timing. That was incredible timing. How did you? Wow, excellent work from the prop department.
Like, okay, I guess we're doing this now.
Yeah. So yeah.
But anyway, from your perspective, Nic, have you encountered people who are trying to hide things or, you know, haven't been able to speak about something like that very well? Or what advice would you just give to somebody who was interviewing with you?
Yeah, I think honesty goes a very long way. There's a lot of humility in being that way. There's a lot of, and there's been times where we've had interviews and people talk about certain health things coming up, and that hasn't dissuaded me from hiring people. And it really just depends on the person and the situation. A lot of that is kind of, I don't want to say it's case by case. That's not really fair. Truthfully, I think if there's something that you're concerned about and you think it's better to talk about it than it is to hide it. I mean, if there's certain things you won't be able to hide, and there's certain things that are easier to. So it really is, if you think it's something that's going to affect your work, I think it's important to, talk about it and be honest about it. If you don't think it is going to, maybe not. And, everyone comes from different places. Everyone comes from different backgrounds, and things are big or small. Sometimes the things that could affect you are, related to specific events. If you have past trauma, for example, you're not necessarily, I don't need to know any of that in an interview. But if there's a situation where you are experiencing something that is, a bit stressful for you, then just be honest with that. It's like, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. And you don't have to say anything other than that. It's like, hey, I need some time. I need some space, whatever it is. Good employers are going to be understanding. It's not something that I think is, I'll put it this way too. If you're out of the industry for a while, there's a gap in employment, you get asked that no matter what, right? It's going to, how come, why are you not working for this, XYZ months, years, or whatever it is? So you need an answer. It might as well be honest, right?
Yeah.
Because, good interviewers can also pick up when someone's, not being truthful. So you might as well, be honest with you and just say, it's like, hey, you don't have to give detail. It's just, I had a medical issue, it's fine. And that's that. You don't have to, go on in great detail. Or you can just say, I took a break from employment. I'm trying to get back. And it can be that simple. You don't even have to say medical, but just have an answer. Practice it, because that's something that's probably going to make you really nervous. That's my advice anyway. Just be honest.
Yeah. I think the thing is, is it going to affect your work? For me, it's always, what are the biases or the assumptions that the interviewers could make? Right. So when they see a gap and you don't have something to say, they're going to infer whatever they want to. So if you're like, yeah, I took a break, then it's like, okay, what were you doing during that break? So I want to know, why didn't you take any classes? Why weren't you still doing volunteering? Why weren't you furthering your knowledge? But if it was because you had a medical reason, or if it was because you had a family crisis, you had to take care of your sick mom, it's better for you to tell me that, then I understand why you were not, now there's HIPAA laws and different things. You don't have to tell me your medical details, but just the reality and the nature of interviewing. If you can't tell me why you weren't advancing your career in some way, I'm going to just assume, that you weren't doing anything, right?
Being lazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always encouraged people to, if you were a stay-at-home mom, you wanted to raise your kids, that's what I want. That's what I felt my priority was at that time, and now they're grown. I'm ready to come back to the workforce and whatever,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And if you are starting your hiatus with your kids to stay at home, which is totally fine, take some classes. Volunteer, do something. So when you come out of that break, you at least can show that you've been interested and passionate about the environment the whole time. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. There was an interview I conducted with someone who said, I'm looking for the right job. That's the reason why I don't have any employment. And I'm like, okay, so what have you been doing since, for the past, 9 months? And it's like, oh, I've just been doing some interviews. Anything else? Oh, no, I'm just looking for the right opportunity. I'm like, okay, all right. That tells me what I need to know. Okay. It's one of those things. Yeah. You can do something. You don't have to sit there and just wait for applications to come out. You can go, be proactive. That's how you'll get a job anyway. As
simple as I've been reading blog articles. I've been following the news. I know what's happening in White House. But you have to be doing something.
Yeah.
Now, if you tell me you had a family crisis and you were or you were deployed, you're military, you're deployed somewhere, of course, I get that. But you've told me the thing for me with the career coaching is filling those gaps and not letting the interviewers or the hiring managers make assumptions about you, because they will fill in any blanks they don't know with whatever they think. And a lot of times if they don't know, that's what they come up with.
Right. Yeah, that's totally fair. I think that's all great points. And, that's a good place to stop. I think that's plenty of advice for now. And let's get to our interview.
Sounds good.
Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have Chris Whitehead returning to the show. He is the air practice lead with ESI, and we are happy to have him back. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you, Nick. I'm happy to come back. I definitely had fun last time we tried this.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us how you've been. It's been about a year since we talked. So what's going on with you?
It's been a very busy year. I think I mentioned this on the last time we chatted, but I've been getting into environmental justice policy stuff extensively. And I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to try to go after work on topics I'm passionate about, and was given a chance at EnviroSciences to build up a group from scratch, essentially. And that takes a lot of time at the beginning and a lot of essentially striking out and building things up. But things have started to hit like absolute wildfire this year, and I couldn't be happier.
So how do you go about setting that up? What are some of the challenges you faced in getting it going?
Sure, that's a great question. If those who don't know, our company is super small. We only have about 22 people or so based in New Jersey, but we go throughout the country and occasionally around the world as needed. But almost no one else in our firm does the type of stuff I do. So it was really a lot of work to get our name out there more. And the general model I've been using is take on a large research project every year, do a paper on it, get it published, and find collaborators that make a lot of sense, and pitch that same project to various conferences throughout the country. I've been doing that for the last 3 years, and it's actually worked very, very well.
Wow, that's really great. And we also learned that you are on the editorial board for the Air and Waste Management Association. So what does that role entail, and how does it tie to what you're doing?
Sure, yeah. I'm involved with a number of professional organizations, but AWMA has been the longest by far. I think I've been with them for, 10, 12 years. But as part of being on the editorial advisory board, I help with their monthly and quarterly magazine and helping plan various special issue topics. And I was put in charge of the environmental justice one earlier this year, and decided to actually put that together based on the general idea that the issues themselves will get further and we'll see more environmental benefits and better transparency and things like that if we're willing to actually listen to different perspectives on these issues and have uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
So that absolutely took off, and I was thrilled. And we actually ended up building that magazine out into a conference in Camden, New Jersey last week.
Wow, that's incredible. How did the conference go?
I couldn't have been happier, to be honest. It was a great idea someone in our programming committee had at the chapter level. And I was able to actually use connections I made through various groups like the Chamber of Commerce in South Jersey to team up with Rutgers University and have them host it. And we actually gave each author of the magazine a chance to lead a session and help them invite speakers here or there if needed. But we ended up with, I think it was 9 sponsors, 83 attendees, 16 panelists. I mean, it couldn't have gone better. So it's the first time I've been involved putting something together like that from start to finish, and to be able to take something from the basically raw concept and carry it through like this and have people basically come up to us a half dozen times after the event and actually ask for more of those types of sessions. I couldn't have asked for anything more.
Oh, that's really great to hear. So how do you find panelists and pull that together?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's the first way I do it. I always kind of joke that if I ever gave a TED talk, it'd be on how to use LinkedIn properly. But I don't want to say aggressive with it, but I've always gone about the general idea that if people are on there, they're either open to collaborating with you or they want to share their thoughts on various topics. So I try and engage anyone who likes things that I do and start conversations about that. And often, obviously, do a lot of reading and know what other people are working on, and just honestly make a phone call and ask if they're interested in being a panelist or what are their thoughts on some regulation here or there. And a lot of times I found that if something that they work on day in, day out, they're probably going to be pretty passionate about it and want to talk about it. And a lot of people are trying to and struggling at times to find a platform to voice their opinions and get their own names out there. So I found that if you have a good idea and are willing to actually put the time in to help develop that, other people will generally follow you.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally true. I couldn't agree more. And so, okay, so you get an idea, you have an idea for who you want to go after. What are some of the topics that you covered at the conference?
Sure, that's a great question. We actually broke it down into 4 different panels. It was legal perspective, industrial. We actually had a youth and student panel, which I was extraordinarily excited about.
Oh, wow.
And then also environmental professionals having a role in bettering the local communities panel, which I actually spoke on as well. And the idea being, and the building it like that is, again, to have everyone in the audience actually be willing to listen to potential ideas and concepts on these topics that might make them a little uncomfortable at first. Mm-hmm. And bring in as many community members as we possibly can to gauge what they want to hear, what their thoughts are on all these topics, and basically call us out if we're not doing anything right, and how they want to actually engage with us going forward. And I put that environmental professional panel last because I wanted to kind of not open their eyes a little bit, because that's the wrong term, but show that this is what environmental technical work actually looks like. All of us up here have been doing this for decades, if not more. We want to try and help you, but no average person in a local community who hasn't had training in this stuff can be expected to understand any of it. So we've had a lot of requests for building up capacity in those areas.
So if you got 4 different panels, you've got 4 different tracks here. We'll touch on the environmental stuff in a second, but like the topics, when you dive into them, like for your panelists, are you looking for multiple perspectives? How do you say you find people on LinkedIn, but what were you looking for when you were finding these people? Is it people in the community as well?
I was actually also joking largely about just doing LinkedIn. Of course, there are other ways, but I wanted to try to get as much of a diversity of perspectives as we possibly can, but also give the session leads the autonomy to build out their own panels how they saw fit. So we had people come in from California, from Missouri, from all over the country, but then also try to loop in as many local nonprofit community groups, people actually working on the ground as we possibly could. And I want to thank again the sponsors who actually supported this program, because by doing that, we were able to offer drastically lower admit rates for people from the public or people from working from these nonprofits. And if we didn't do that, in my opinion, I don't think we would have gotten the type of buy-in and the type of strong attendance that we did. A lot of times that cost point is a barrier to entry that people don't initially think about.
Of course.
I think if you actually value the perspectives and want to hear from these people, you have to understand that paying $150 for a conference is just not plausible.
Yeah, of course. Understood. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And it actually kind of leads me right back to talking about, the environment when it comes to environmental justice. You're talking about, low income communities in particular. Environmental stewardship is sometimes not on the community's mind because their priorities are different because of the situation that they are in. Is that something you cover? Is that something that you had feedback on?
I don't know if I would necessarily even agree with that, but I agree with your general concept that there are other constraints that force you to have to think about other things. You can't necessarily go as far as you might want to on an environmental topic if you have to worry about whether food's coming on the table. Right. But there are certain hyper-local issues that we've seen a lot of action on, things like doing rain gardens or doing community cleanup events, or there's a lot of action, obviously, now in New Jersey with the environmental justice law that came out on actually trying to hold industrial sites more accountable, right, and actually get them to push and do everything they can to reduce their environmental impacts. So I would say that there is a lot of interest in all of these topics, and there are certain groups around the country and obviously local in each state trying to assist however they can. But again, capacity in each one of these groups tends to be a huge issue. So things like funding from various foundations, from private companies, and obviously the federal government certainly comes into play a lot and definitely helps.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure. So the conversation it was a good back and forth on environmental with the community.
It was overall, and a lot of it from the members of Camden and the local towns who did come. They wanted to tell their own personal stories. They wanted to tell how their family members were affected by these things, how long certain family members had asthma or various cancer problems that popped up. And there was a lot of raw emotion, honestly, that came out. But at the end of all of this, we had, again, a lot of people come up to us and thank us, honestly, because they said it was the first time at one of these events that they actually felt like they were heard, and they believed that people wanted to actually continue engaging with them and try to help these issues. Understandably, there's been a lot of, I don't know, for lack of a better term here, broken promises in the past, and just too much put on top of each other. I think I mentioned this in my last talk with you guys. Mm-hmm. The basic idea of environmental justice is that it's not necessarily any one individual site that's doing something incorrectly or operating poorly. It's the fact that you have so many different industrial sites on top of each other, and then mobile sources from highways and ports. And after you put it all together, they just form immense hotspots of elevated PM 2.5 and NOx, things like that. And unsurprising that if you look and find an area that has these numbers, that there are going to be corresponding health impacts, things like elevated asthma rates, unfortunately, things like elevated cancers at times. Again, not necessarily tied to any one individual site, but there's just too much together. So I honestly really applaud what states like New Jersey have been trying to actually do and put forward cumulative impacts of analysis models to try to start untangling this a bit. And the sites that have strong environmental management and have their controls in place are probably not going to be affected as much, but the ones who haven't been keeping up will definitely have an impact here.
Okay. Yeah, which makes total sense. So, which, brings me to, so we have communities, we've got companies, corporations. How do companies, for example, benefit from instilling some of the EJ fundamentals that you've seen at the conference and in your work?
That's a great question. And it's honestly something I've been traveling the country the last couple of years, trying to convince people of. I was one of the first to actually tell everyone that the New Jersey model was going to get legs and start impacting other states. It's essentially the same basic refrain I've been talking about ever since. And the fact that if you plan ahead on this and instill things that improve transparency, that actually work to minimize your environmental impacts, almost doesn't even matter if your state has a compliance program or not tied to environmental justice, because you'll have the building blocks in place already to have a history of actually working and engaging on these issues with local partners, which is absolutely invaluable. You're not going to trick anybody on this. They'll know if you care about it. They'll know if you're putting skin in the game and talking to them longer and at different times than you necessarily have to. I could go off on forever on this, but the public hearing model themselves is by nature transactional. We give people 30 days to comment and at most a couple minutes to get up and actually vent their frustration. But that hasn't worked. And I think people are still starting to come around to the fact that there's a better way.
Yeah. So what are the changes you'd like to see? Because I agree. I think you're right. That isn't necessarily great public engagement. It's like you have a very specific short window and that's it. So what do you suggest?
Well, again, a couple of the basics here is actually improving transparency. You have to show and find a way, to give an honest representation as to how your site is performing environmentally. There are many ways to do that. A popular one I've seen from a couple of our clients, putting SEMS information, continuous emissions monitoring info on their websites.
Mm-hmm.
So any local member who wants to find out how that site is performing at any given time can log in and check that performance against permit thresholds. Tangible thing is easy to read. Basics like if it's under, it's green. If it's not, it's red. Something like that. You don't have to have an environmental background to understand that.
Right.
You have to make things easier on folks. And also, to be very, very honest, cut through some of the misinformation that is out there as well, because we're seeing that. And I don't know if it's intended or not, but there are at times just stats that are brought up during these comment periods that are just not accurate. So it's a great way to try to combat that and actually give a fair representation of the impact that your individual site is having.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned stats, because I think that's another one. Numbers don't lie, but if you use the wrong numbers, you can say a lot of different things. And that's a really challenging thing because people don't even mean to do it. Sometimes they just accidentally are comparing, for example, census data is a great example of this, right? Where you have, I'll compare the 2010 census to a 5-year average. Right? Well, those aren't the same things. You're looking at two different numbers, so they're not quite the same thing. So
and
how
actually,
do you?
Another one that we see a lot is actually potential to emit versus actual emissions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that potential to emit is what each plant is spitting out, when almost always that is not what's actually happening.
Right.
And I'm not being an apologist for industry at all.
Right.
There are obviously impacts. There are steps to take to get better at this. And there are, unfortunately, plenty of sites who are not doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's room here.
Yeah. So how do you, I guess it's one of the things that air quality is a lot of stats, a lot of numbers. How do you kind of convey that to people who are maybe not familiar with how to use that data and how to interpret it?
Well, I should give you another one. And it's something you might actually agree with also, Nick. Generally, in the sciences, people are actually relatively uncomfortable speaking to the public and actually relaying their points. There are plenty of people I know who are extremely strong technically, but if you put them in front of a microphone or put them in front of a public hearing, it's like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
I think I said in that article actually for AWMA that if it doesn't fit in an Excel spreadsheet, some people I know are just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you have to get away from that a little bit and be willing to actually engage and try to actually relate. A great way that I do it, actually, any environmental justice or climate change talk I've actually given in the last couple of years, I started off with a picture of my children on the bio slide. I do that because it's born for commonality. There's a lot of times I hear people, again, just terrified of doing public hearing stuff. Everyone's heard stories about the pissed off member of the community coming in and just screaming at the people, and apparently nothing gets accomplished. But if you understand that that person is as upset as they are because they're thinking about their children, they're thinking about their futures, that's what they're passionate about. Yeah. Obviously, it's also what I'm passionate about and why I do the work that I do. So if you start on that point and go forward and try to actually understand why that raw emotion is actually there, what potentially has caused it, and what, if anything, your site can do about it to try to be a better neighbor, I think we help each other out.
Oh, totally agree. Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. And very well said. Public speaking is not for everybody. It's not easy, but it's also something that, takes practice and you can get better at. And I think that's a really good message too. And a reminder, this helps me, it's like everyone, you have good and bad days at work. You can have good and bad days in public and you'll still be okay. You can have a great talk and an okay talk, and then you can go back and have a great talk right after that. Do you have any other advice for public speaking?
And it's funny too, because I grew up with a bad stuttering problem as a child. And you're still obviously going to probably hear it every now and then now, and especially after I have a couple of pints at a time. Right. But to get past that was a huge, huge struggle. And I decided at one point, you either let this thing dominate you and put you down, or you get past it and you live your life and actually try and do the type of work and have some impact. So that's definitely the route I chose. And that's
Yeah.
what I would encourage everyone to also try, because no matter what your exact path in life, and if you happen to have an affliction or you don't, we're a lot more alike than we're not. And
Yeah.
I think all of us ideally same basic passion that we want to actually leave the world a better place than was given to us.
Yeah.
So that's again why I'm as passionate on the topics I work on now with air compliance, with EJ, especially alignment risk now, which is insanely taking off. But what keeps me going every day.
So yeah, I really appreciate the words, and it's great to hear, because I'm sure that's not easy to handle and to manage. But being able to overcome that and be a good public speaker is fantastic, and it's just proof you can put your mind to something and move forward. And
apparently, people like me, which I still don't understand why.
Yeah, well, and it's like that humor, I think, is part of it. It's just always you don't take yourself too seriously, and you'll be all right.
I try and be genuine.
Yeah, because that's all it is. It's just that's how people connect, and I love that. So we've got a lot of stuff coming out. Proposing new environmental justice regulations or requirements, new or updated climate requirements. Can you kind of tell us what's new in air quality from a regulation standpoint? Have we had any big changes in the last year?
Well, there's a lot of different stuff. I'm not going to walk you through everything, but generally how EPA handles it is they do what's called new source performance standards for various sectors. And they look at those on a regular basis and identify what's actually best available control technology and best practices at that time. And they basically look and see, is what we have on the books okay, or are we identifying potential areas that we have to look at this again? And oftentimes they'll go back and tighten things up a little bit. We saw this recently in the particulate matter standards. They're pulling it back from 12 parts per million to 8, I think it is. And just that one small change has a corresponding health impact of about saving about 4 times as many lives. I'm sorry. And that's what this all comes back to. And what traditionally we haven't been great at is identifying health impacts and the obvious personal and economic detriment that they have. And actually trying to get models and standards in place to true that up and be as aggressive as we can, but also on a sustainable basis.
Yeah. So what's the future of air quality regulations? Are we going to see more changes? Are we going to level out? How do you see these things changing in the future?
That was actually, I don't know if I told you this story, Nick, but I was very lucky to learn from a guy who had been doing this business for 45 years or so at the time. And he was the first guy to put emission controls on coal-fired power plants in Michigan. That's going back to like the 70s.
Yeah.
Absolutely different time. But he said throughout his whole career, and it will stay through mine, we'll have job security because there's always going to be changes. And there's always going to be things you have to inform your clients on. And try to minimize surprises wherever you can and tell them how much things are going to cost. So obviously things are in the news now. There's a huge push to get off fossil fuels. There's a push to do things like offshore winds, carbon capture projects. There's so many things going on at once, but I think at times you also have to get a dose of reality that these are all large-scale infrastructure projects that don't just happen overnight.
Yeah.
There are certain steps we could take to get them to come through faster and to not sacrifice public engagement in doing so. But again, I've been involved in offshore wind a ton and trying to do some more. These are large projects that the public doesn't understand because it hasn't been relayed properly. That take almost a decade of study beforehand and extensive approvals before anything can get done. So again, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think we are definitely headed that way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's good to hear. And you're totally right. It's there's always going to be a job, and especially when it comes to air quality, it's it's something that's not many people understand, and so there's always going to be a need for people to know. When it relates to offshore wind, what do you work on for offshore wind in regards to air quality?
Yeah, actually, I'll be very honest. Ever since I moved over to environmental sciences, we haven't been able to get any work in offshore wind, because although there are certain steps being taken now to improve this, it's not really conducive for a small business at this time, in my opinion.
Right.
We've taken some steps to get ourselves out there, and a lot more people know our company and talking about giving us proposals for various things. But my experience in offshore wind was actually earlier at larger firms, and I was fortunate enough to actually run the air emissions profiling work for one of the biggest offshore wind developments off the coast of Massachusetts, which at the time was Mayflower Wind. It's changed over to the South Coast now. So I'm obviously trying to still develop that work, still highlight the fact that our company can do all the things that big companies can, but it's difficult at times because developers understandably want to go to a source they know that they can trust, that can do as much as possible in-house, and just trying to streamline all of this, which is obviously something that they should try and do. But I would encourage them to also take the chance to look out and develop programs to actually help foster small businesses, because it's been a tough time for offshore wind over the last 18 months or so. And if there's not more focus and actual drive on addressing bottlenecks now, I fear that a lot of small companies are just going to drop out of the industry.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting to hear. Yeah. Well, hopefully, maybe there's going to be some incentives for small businesses in the future. I think that's unfortunate if that is the case, but hopefully, maybe that'll change.
And actually, just to add another thought onto that, I would encourage anyone who does want to get into the offshore wind business or any type of renewables development to keep in mind a few things. That obviously, again, these are large scale projects that do take quite a while. So you're not going to get the immediate payback that you might be expecting. But the best thing, in my opinion, that you can do is get your name out there. It's attend the marketing events, publish wherever possible, attend the conferences, and don't be afraid to ask hard questions if you have them. Because if all of us just have pom-poms on for offshore wind, for renewables development, that doesn't get anything accomplished at all.
100%. Yeah. I know there's been some conversations about, in New Jersey, the offshore wind and the right whales and how those are all intertwined. And, there's not tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the answer is they're still trying to figure out what the impacts are. But if there are any, that changes a lot of how they do it. Is that right?
It isn't. I'd say it's a little more accurate that every study done to date has shown that there is no impact whatsoever on the types of sonar scanning that have been done. But we don't know for sure going forward as things change. And this scientific process itself doesn't just stop. You keep looking at things, you keep studying. There's a chance 10 years down the line, we might have a better answer. But all you can do now is go with the best information available. And I honestly get a little upset when I read all misinformation that's out there and the public, because it doesn't show an understanding of, again, the time that goes into all these different processes and these specialists who focus on one small aspect of each project and are experts in that field and have done decades of research, but we're not going to actually buy what they're telling us. We're going to actually put our stock in something that we hear something that we actually hear on the radio, something we actually read online. That doesn't make any sense. But if that's all anyone's being exposed to, even if they don't want to initially believe it at first, eventually over time, it's going to have an effect. Yeah.
I mean, it's like a subconscious thing almost. Like when you hear this several different places and well, it's got to be true. I've heard it 3 different times or 4 different times or whatever it is. Yeah. Which is, we could probably do an entire show on just misinformation. But since I want to, keep some of your free time for you. I
don't know what free time is, man. Obviously.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it, man. I totally agree. But I was going to say, like, what do you have? Are there any other like fun stories from working on your projects? Any other projects you want to highlight? I could say we've got a little bit more time, but yeah, what else do you have going on project wise? Yeah, I have a lot actually. Probably almost a dozen different clients now. One of the biggest ones actually, we're working on a Superfund site doing air monitoring and sampling work in New Jersey.
and trying to scope how to actually remediate a site that's had just thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of acid tars sitting there for decades. And at the time, it was best available practice to put the stuff where they did and put a water cap on it, but not a whole lot happened since.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be a part of a project that's trying to address that and trying to actually turn that land into something that's usable and safe for local environments and local people. But again, these are long projects, and the one I'm actually talking about in particular is probably going to be conservatively around 7 years or so. 7
years?
Probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, gosh, how do you manage a project that's 7 years long?
Well, it's a big team of people, and just keep moving forward, and lots of different calendars and trying to meet upcoming metrics, honestly. Yeah, you scope things out long term and get ideas to what you want to do. But whether or not you can actually meet that schedule, and importantly meet that budget, is if you can meet not the long term goal, if you can meet the goal that's a month out, and just keep doing all that.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like one foot in front of the other, basically.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. It's just kind of fun on a large scale like that. It's like the finish line might seem very far away, but
And actually also too, it's being open to actually bringing in different technologies in various parts of the project that might be better at certain aspects that are holding you up. If you can save time in one area, it might be worth the cost to bring in a better technology. And having that conversation over and over, it seems.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like, okay, I'll steal one more question for you then. Speaking of technology, right? It's grown immensely in lots of different ways over the last, even no matter what time period you take, right? Last 5 years, last 10 years, last 2 months, it seems like something new is coming out to help us do our jobs better. So for air quality, what are we talking about? What have been like the technological advances that have really helped push forward just even understanding what we're putting out in the atmosphere?
Well, there's a lot of things I can answer there, but I'll go back to environmental justice for a minute. I think last time I checked, there are 18 different states that have environmental justice screening tools to identify where potential overburden areas are and the actual drivers that are causing the problems in each state. That's critically important. Many federal agencies also have comparable tools and comparable guidance now as well. But something I've been working on for the past year is a cumulative impacts model. And for anyone who does environmental justice work, that's kind of a unicorn that everyone's been chasing after to try to do this right. Because if you identify the different sources of contamination that are actually causing these issues and manage the large data sets, you can start to inform policy better. So we put together a project in South Jersey and Philadelphia that actually looks at cross-sector cumulative impacts analysis of small-scale development projects, and essentially use what I'm calling a Sim City model,
right?
And actually put different sites and with different emissions profiles, and we put together in different parts of the state. And what happens if we put 5 of these here, 4 of these here? What's that actually look like over time? Yeah. And what we found is that although there have been considerable gains in better air quality and lower NOx and PM 2.5, and there's a lot of promise coming out on the actual horizon from things like offshore winds, a lot of that might be slowed down if we don't think about development properly and think about changes to local zoning and the impact that highways have. As an example, we found that as a big one. In our study alone, we focus on Camden, New Jersey, and there's an elevated impact by an order of about 20% as to where the contaminants could be as opposed to non-overburden areas. And again, that's only on a small scale development, assuming that everything else stays along the same general path and there's no big changes in the slope of things like electric vehicles or cross-state pollution, essentially if we stay on the same track for a while.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's all fascinating stuff. Like I say, that's maybe that's another episode too, just on
those. Come back again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, for sure. So we are getting close to the end of time. I was going to ask you if you have any hobbies, but I think this is your hobby, right? That's kind of what else
As
do
far
you
as
have fun?
hobbies go, I'm actually a Cub Scout leader for my son.
Oh yeah,
A lot
yeah,
of time on that, and it's just I kind of joke. I kind of actually feel, and it's something you might actually relate to also, Nick,
hmm
that I'm just a caretaker for any money I bring in. It tends to go out almost immediately as it comes. So actually, my son has ninja class.
Oh
That's a
yeah,
chunk of money. My daughter has soccer,
yeah,
Cub Scouts. So every day is allocated to something.
right, for sure. Very well said. Well, Chris, before we let you go, I'll ask you one more question. Anything that we didn't talk about that you want to bring up?
Great question. I always like to end on positive notes.
Yeah.
So I'll just say, without hopefully not sounding like a Hallmark card here, think about the individual impacts that you have in your own operations, in your own everyday lives, and how can you improve and be more environmentally friendly. But then if you help run any type of industrial companies, just understand that there are answers out there, and you don't have to be afraid of environmental justice. It's not coming to get you.
hmm
There's a lot of demonization and us versus them mentality out there that I think is extraordinarily unnecessary.
Yeah.
And occasionally, at times, I feel my role comes in as a mediator to show the types of commonalities that a lot of us do have, and that even if someone is actually at an industrial site, you want to be talking to them and have a productive talk if
Yeah.
you are actually genuine about bringing down the environmental impacts in your local area.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are going to actually affect the change.
Oh,
If you get emission control, if you can get better practice on that large industrial site, that's how the air quality is going to be better. I mean, outside of a lot of people buying electric cars, and that's not happening anytime soon.
right. Right. Well,
I'm
no,
not for that because a lot of people who are actually trying to drive the EVs and
yeah.
and actually push that along. I'm all for it. I'm just skeptical it's going to happen as fast
Right.
as some think it is, or actually hope it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very well said. It's a great way to end. Now, if anybody wants to reach out to you and ask you any more follow-ups or connect with you in any way, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you could pull me up on there. Or if you want to send me a quick email, it's cwhitehead@esienv.com. And I honestly am extremely active on presentations and stuff. So if you look at an agenda for an upcoming event, there's a good chance I'm probably going to be on it. It feels like that sometimes.
Hey, yeah, I totally hear you. So thank you, Chris, so much for being here. It's great to catch up with you again. So glad things are going well. And we'll see you again sometime.
Thanks, Nick. Happy to do it.
All right.
That's our show. Thank you, Chris, for joining us again today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.